He was walking across the campus, hands in his pockets, hair uncombed as always. Leather shoes worn at the edges, scuffed from years of walking the same paths between his office and his home. Princeton, 1935. Spring morning, the kind of day where sunlight filters through young leaves and students sprawl on grass with open books. Albert Einstein, 56 years old, the most famous scientist alive, was taking his usual route to the Institute for Advanced Study. And his ankles were bare, no socks, just skin between the leather of his shoes and the cuffs of his wrinkled trousers. A young graduate student named Thomas noticed. He'd been working up the courage for weeks to approach Einstein, to ask him about relativity, about unified field theory, about the mysteries of the cosmos. But when the moment came, when Einstein walked past the bench where Thomas sat, something else came out instead. Professor Einstein. Einstein stopped, turned. His eyes were gentle behind round glasses. He smiled slightly, the way he always did when students approached him. Patient, present. Yes? Thomas stood, his prepared questions about spacetime suddenly forgotten. I hope this isn't rude, but... He hesitated. Why don't you wear socks? It was the question half the campus whispered about, the peculiar habit of the world's greatest mind. Some thought it was absent-mindedness. Others assumed it was some European eccentricity. A few believed it was deliberate protest against convention. Einstein looked down at his bare ankles, then back up at Thomas. 5 seconds of silence. Then he smiled. Not the polite smile from before, something warmer, more real. You really want to know? Thomas nodded. Einstein gestured to the bench. Sit. They sat. Einstein stretched his legs out, displaying his sockless ankles without shame. When I was young, maybe your age, I wore socks every day. Good wool socks, my mother insisted. He paused, his eyes distant, remembering. And every few weeks I would discover a hole, always in the same place, the big toe. He wiggled his foot slightly. The big toe is rebellious. It pushes. It wears through fabric. So I would get new socks. And within weeks, another hole. Another reminder that even the simplest things require maintenance, attention, constant repair. Thomas listened, unsure where this was going. One morning, I was getting dressed. I had an important lecture. I reached for socks and found them all worn through, every pair, holes in every single one. Einstein's voice was calm, almost amused at the memory. And I stood there, in my room, holding these damaged socks. And I thought, why am I doing this? He turned to face Thomas directly. I do not wear socks because they serve no essential purpose that my shoes do not already provide. They exist only to satisfy a social convention. A rule no one remembers creating, but everyone follows. The words hung between them. Every morning, millions of people wake up and put on socks. They wash them, fold them, match them in pairs. They spend mental energy on this small task. They replace them when they wear out. They worry if the colors match their outfit. Einstein shook his head slowly. And for what? Because everyone else does it. Thomas opened his mouth, then closed it. I have limited time on this earth, Einstein said quietly. Every human does. And I realized I was spending some of that precious time, some of that finite mental energy, on maintaining socks, on a convention that added nothing meaningful to my life. He leaned back on the bench. So I stopped. I simply stopped wearing them. But people notice, Thomas said. They talk about it. Yes. Einstein's smile widened. They do. And that tells you something important about people, doesn't it? I have spent decades trying to understand the fundamental nature of reality. I've published theories about space and time, about gravity and light, about the very fabric of existence. He paused. And what do they notice? That I don't wear socks. There was no bitterness in his voice, just observation, just truth. When you stop following a small convention, people notice immediately. They notice the absence of socks faster than they notice the presence of ideas that could change how we understand the universe. He looked at Thomas. What does that tell you about where human attention naturally goes? Thomas felt something shift in his understanding. Most people, Einstein continued, spend their lives following rules they never questioned. They wear uncomfortable clothes because fashion demands it. They work jobs they hate because society expects it. They suppress thoughts and ideas because convention says certain things aren't proper to consider. His voice dropped lower. They let other people's arbitrary rules consume the limited time and energy they have for thinking. He stood up slowly, bones creaking slightly. I am not interested in being comfortable in society. I am interested in being comfortable in my mind. And my mind cannot do its work if it's cluttered with unnecessary concerns about whether my socks match, or whether my appearance satisfies people who will never contribute anything to my understanding of physics. Einstein started walking again. Thomas fell into step beside him. The socks are a small thing, Einstein said, a tiny rebellion against nothing important. But they remind me every single day that I have a choice, that I can look at any convention, any assumption, any rule that people follow without thinking, and ask, does this serve me? Does this serve my work? Does this serve truth? He glanced at Thomas. Or does it just serve conformity? They walked in silence for a moment. The campus moved around them, students in pressed clothes and perfect socks, following paths laid out by others. You came to ask me about relativity, Einstein said suddenly. Thomas blinked. How did you know? You're a physics student. You've been watching me for weeks, working up courage, and when you finally speak, you ask about socks. Einstein's eyes twinkled. You were looking for permission. Permission? To be different, to think differently, to stop following rules that don't make sense to you. Einstein stopped walking and faced him fully. Let me tell you something about relativity that they don't teach in class. The mathematics are important, yes, but the real insight, the real revolution, came from asking a question everyone else thought was stupid. He pointed upward. What if time isn't absolute? What if the thing everyone assumes is fixed and universal is actually flexible and relative? He lowered his hand. Everyone thought that was nonsense, obvious nonsense. Time is time. Clocks tick at the same rate for everyone. That's just how reality works. Thomas nodded slowly. But I asked anyway. I questioned the assumption. And reality answered. And it turned out the obvious truth everyone knew was wrong. Time is relative. Space is relative. The universe is stranger and more beautiful than anyone imagined. But we couldn't see it because we were too busy assuming the conventions we inherited were actually laws of nature. Einstein started walking again, slower now. Socks are like that, not important in themselves, but their practice. Every time I put on shoes without socks, I'm practicing the skill of questioning convention, of looking at what everyone does and asking, but why? Is this necessary? Is this true? Or is this just what we've always done? They reached the steps of the institute. Einstein paused at the bottom. You want to do important work? He asked. Real work? Work that matters? Yes, Thomas said. Then learn to recognize the difference between laws of nature and laws of fashion. Learn to ignore the latter. Learn to let people talk about your socks while you think about the cosmos. Einstein smiled. Learn to save your mental energy for things that actually deserve it. He climbed the first few steps, then stopped and looked back. The world will always try to convince you that conventions matter, that you should spend your limited time and attention on matching socks and saying the right things and thinking the approved thoughts. They'll call you eccentric if you refuse, absent-minded, strange. He shrugged. Let them. While they're busy maintaining their socks, you can be busy understanding reality. Einstein continued up the steps. At the door, he paused one final time. Oh, and Thomas, ask yourself why you really approached me today. Was it to ask about my socks? Or was it to see if someone who thinks differently about big things might also think differently about small things? He pulled open the door. The answer to that question matters more than anything I could teach you about physics. The door closed behind him. Thomas stood at the bottom of the steps for a long time. He looked down at his own feet. Perfectly matched black socks, clean, proper, conventional. He never forgot that conversation. Years later, he would become a respected physicist himself. And every morning when he got dressed, he would remember Einstein's words. Sometimes he wore socks, sometimes he didn't. But he always asked himself why. The choice itself didn't matter. The questioning did. Einstein died in 1955. His papers and equations would be studied for generations. His theories would be tested and proven again and again. Schools would teach his mathematics, universities would analyze his thought experiments. But the thing people remembered most in daily life, the wild hair, the rumpled clothes, the absence of socks, they remembered the small rebellions more than the cosmic insights, just like he said they would, and somewhere in that truth lies another lesson about human nature, about where attention goes, about what people notice and what they miss. Einstein understood relativity, but he also understood people, and he knew that sometimes the most radical thing you can do is refuse to wear socks. Not because socks matter, but because the refusal reminds you, every single day, that you have the freedom to question anything. Even the things everyone else assumes are obviously true, especially those things